It was January on the island of Sodor. It was so cold that icicles hung from the front of the engine sheds like necklaces. Thomas's driver had to remove them with a shovel. He banged at the door so loudly that it woke the engines. Thomas was already awake and steaming, ready to go. He was to start early. The Fat Controller had a special job for him. When his driver was ready, they made their way to the big station, where the Fat Controller was waiting with an important visitor. "This is Mr. Bjork, an engineer from Lapland. He's come to help us mend some signal boxes on the railway. I'd like you to take him around the island, Thomas." "Of course, sir," Thomas puffed proudly. The Fat Controller and Mr. Bjork left to make arrangements. While they were gone, Gordon and James arrived to start work.
"What are you looking so happy about?"
Gordon huffed. "I'm taking an important visitor around the island," Thomas told him. Gordon snorted.
"Only important engines do that, not silly little tank engines."
"Yeah, stop showing off, Thomas," agreed James. Thomas steamed sadly away to take on coal and water before setting out with Mr. Bjork. But when he arrived at the water column, he found it was frozen. Thomas was worried. "If I can't have a drink, I won't be able to go very far," he sighed. He puffed back to tell the Fat Controller and Mr. Bjork. Mr. Bjork had an idea. "I can help. Please take me there, Thomas." So Thomas took Mr. Bjork to the water column. He took out an ice pick and smashed through the layer of ice in the water column.
"There we are,"
he called and clambered down. In no time, Thomas's tanks were soon filled and they set off. They worked hard all day long. And at last, they reached the station by the reservoir. "We'll drop Mr. Bjork off at the next station," the driver told Thomas. "The Fat Controller will be waiting for him there." Just then, Thomas's driver noticed some ducks pecking at the frozen water on the reservoir. "Oh, the ducks need a drink too," said Thomas's driver. "Perhaps Mr. Bjork can help them," suggested Thomas.
"Of course I will,"
smiled Mr. Bjork. Every winter, Lapland is white with snow and ice. Mr. Bjork made a hole in the ice big enough for the ducks to drink through. Then, he took a sharp chisel out of his tool bag, chipped away at a block of ice that he'd removed from the reservoir. In a few minutes, he'd made a beautiful model of Thomas.
"It's an ice sculpture,"
smiled Mr. Bjork.
"It's a present for you."
Thomas was very excited, and his driver brought the sculpture into the cab so they could take it back to the yard. At the next station, the Fat Controller was waiting. Mr. Bjork said goodbye to Thomas and his driver, and they puffed back to the yard. He was looking forward to showing the other engines his sculpture.
"Where's your important visitor?"
Thomas briefly explained.
"But he gave me a present, look!"
Thomas's driver stepped aside so the other engines could see the beautiful ice sculpture, but all that remained was a pool of water. The ice had melted in the warm cab. Thomas felt miserable.
"You came all this way to show us your leaky boiler,"
teased James. It was an ice sculpture," sighed Thomas. "Mr. Bjork said so." But next morning, a wonderful surprise awaited Thomas. There stood Mr. Bjork with a beautiful ice sculpture of all the engines and the Fat Controller.
"We're sorry, Thomas," said James. "Now we understand you did have an important visitor."
Thomas chuckled. And what a wonderful surprise he's left for us to remember his visit.